Most people do not talk about the exhaustion that comes from trying to become better. Not the tiredness of the body, but the quiet fatigue of always correcting yourself, refining your flaws, and holding your breath through every change. You wake up with intentions that feel hopeful and fall asleep with the same familiar disappointment. The effort looks noble from the outside, like discipline or ambition. Inside, it feels like constantly swimming against a current that never rests. There was once a traveler who carried this same exhaustion without knowing its name. He had spent years studying how people transform their lives, collecting methods like tools he believed he must master. Each new practice filled him with hope at first, then with frustration when it faded. He assumed something in him was broken or insufficient. So when he heard of a monk who spoke of change without struggle, he decided to seek him out. The monk lived high in the hills, far from noise and expectation. His dwelling was small, and his garden appeared untamed to an unfamiliar eye. Plants grew unevenly, stones lay where they had fallen, and nothing seemed carefully controlled. Yet the traveler felt an unexpected calm the moment he arrived. It was the kind of calm that made his own inner restlessness feel suddenly obvious. When the traveler shared his story, the monk listened in silence. There was no interruption, no advice offered too soon. After a long pause, the monk asked a simple question. When you are tired, does forcing yourself to relax ever bring rest? The traveler smiled politely, but the question lingered like an echo he could not shake. The monk invited him to stay for several days and help tend the garden. Each morning, the traveler worked hard to organize what seemed disordered. He trimmed, rearranged, and corrected with care and intensity. Each evening, he noticed that much of his work had quietly been undone. The monk never explained, never criticized, and never praised his effort. On the fourth day, the traveler finally spoke. He asked why his careful work kept being reversed. The monk looked at him kindly and said, "You are treating growth as something that obeys pressure." The words landed gently, yet they stirred something deep. For the first time, the traveler wondered whether effort itself was not the problem, but the way he was using it. That night, sleep came slowly. The traveler reflected on how often his attempts to improve were fueled by frustration with who he already was. Even kindness toward himself had become another task to perform correctly. He realized how often he confused self-control with self-understanding. The awareness was uncomfortable, yet strangely relieving. The next morning, the monk showed him how to water a single plant. There was no instruction beyond attention. Just enough water to support it, no more and no less. Change happens when conditions are right, the monk said quietly. It resists when it is forced. When the traveler eventually left the hills, his life looked mostly the same. His habits were familiar, and his challenges had not disappeared. What had changed was his relationship with effort itself. He no longer believed that suffering was proof of progress. He began to allow understanding to guide him instead of pressure. Over time, small shifts occurred without struggle. He noticed patterns rather than attacking them. He responded instead of reacted. Change arrived softly, without announcement, and stayed because it was no longer built on resistance. If trying harder has only made you tired, it may be because change does not respond to force. Understanding creates movement more naturally than pressure ever will. When you stop fighting yourself, growth begins to feel like relief rather than labor.